Hey, I'm some nobody here with a new microphone that I hope is a significant improvement because my voice even in person sounds like I have a low quality mic. Last time I got pulled over by the police, I wound up getting a pretty bad beating because the officer kept hearing his voice echo. I was supposed to have this new microphone in time for the Paladins video, but unfortunately the delivery guys stopped to take a breather halfway up the mountain, and that's when the cold will get you. But me and Dan went out and found the guy, I got my new mic, and to help me get acclimated to it, I decided to do a quick and dirty follow-up to my DOGtide video. If you haven't seen that video, I think it's a pretty good one, you should go check it out. In it I talked about Warhammer 40k DOGtide and how it's quickly become one of my favorite horde shooters ever. A huge chunk of that video was me going over all 4 classes, what they specialize in, what their talent trees consist of, what they do in general. But just a few months after I put that video out, they released a 5th class, the Arbitrators, and I know what you're thinking when you hear that, Type 1 or Type 2. The Arbitrators, or Arbitrators as individual members are called, are basically Warhammer 40k's versions of judges from Judge Dredd. They're like cops if cops were sadistic, prone to violent and angry outbursts, and were more concerned with hurting criminals than protecting and serving the public. I know what some of you were thinking, I'm not playing as a fucking pig, man. All cops are bastards. And while that's a real nice radical opinion you have there, what if I told you that playing as the arbitrator means you get to have a dog?
Just take all my money! Oh, not this soon! Not this soon!
Compromised your whole belief system just like that, you make me sick. You're lucky the dog that comes with the job has a backbone because you clearly don't. Betrayal of your principles aside, you paid the $12 admission fee, went through Arbitrator Academy, and now you've been sent to Tertium to join the war effort alongside a bunch of death row inmates. You're asking yourself, what am I doing here, when your first question should have been,
what the dog doing?
So obviously the big thing about the Arbitrator is that they're the first class in DOGtide to bring an AI companion alongside them, a dog you can name whatever you want. For the purpose of this video, I've swapped out my normal dog for Dr. Mambo here because I don't want any of you to steal my top tier dog name. Even though he's just a substitute, Dr. Mambo is alright, he's got a PhD in being a dog. Fat Shark's design process behind the dog was specifically that they didn't want it to be annoying in any way, shape, or form. They didn't want it to get in your way so it doesn't have collision, they didn't want it to block your vision so it tries to stay in your field of view but always tries to stay just outside of your line of sight. They didn't want you to have to babysit the thing so it doesn't have a health bar or any kind of mechanic where it gets put out of commission. When left to its own devices, the dog will primarily target enemies outside your field of view to keep you from getting caught by surprise. The only weakness the dog has is that it can only target one enemy at a time, so it's not going to play the game for you. But even with that in mind, if you were to play entirely passively with the dog, you'd still get huge and, more importantly, free value. When you start actively playing with it is when the dog gets a little silly.
4-year-old spotted! Pitbull!
So when you double ping a special enemy, you give the dog an active command to go after them, and the only enemies these aren't too effective on are the Ogryn enemies. They sort of just bounce off the Ogryns, but if you sick them on a boss enemy, they latch on, and the dogs pretty much tear the thing apart. But that's with some specific talent tree specking. Even at a base, if you sick them on a human-sized enemy, they're dead. The second you ping a human-sized special enemy, your name might as well automatically pop up in the kill feed. Your dog will chase them to the ends of the earth, and nothing short of your teammates killing them first or you sending the dog after somebody else is going to save them. If your dog is able to pin down an enemy, it means that enemy is going to die. It might take a bit longer for the tougher ones, but it's guaranteed. There's no maximum range you can send the dog, there's no cooldown on sending the dog out, and there's really no risk to doing it. Pinging an enemy twice is extremely fast, and you really only have to aim it in their general direction. To add on to that, the Arbitrator is the second class after Ogryn to get weapons that include shields. So if you're dealing with gunners, snipers, or reapers, some of the most dangerous enemies in the game, you don't even have to risk taking a single bullet to instantly put the Marluxia death count down from Kingdom Hearts 2 on them. Every class in the game has a tool like this that is really good at killing special enemies, but no other class gets it for absolutely free without spending a single talent point. In essence, the dog is like a psyker brain burst that doesn't leave you defenseless while it's charging up. An Ogren's big friendly rock that you don't have to worry about aiming or running out of. A Zealot's dash or backstab that you can hit from anywhere on the map. The Veteran's focus target keystone that you don't need to follow up on. I'm not complaining that the Arbitrator and the dog are too strong, because at the end of the day, it's a PvE game. They don't make the game an absolute cakewalk, and for 1650 rupee, they better be fucking strong. I'm just saying that the dog has exceeded everybody's expectations in terms of usefulness. But it isn't just the dog that makes the Arbitrator really strong, it's also the fact that they've got one of the best designed talent trees in the game. See, the Arbitrator naturally has very high health and toughness because there are only 5 miscellaneous stat boosters in their entire tree. And the interconnectivity of the tree means you pretty much never have to pick up a talent you don't want to get one you actually do. And again, pretty much every node is a big effect rather than a minor stat boost, so it's almost impossible to waste points on the Arbitrator talent tree. This talent tree's got like 1% body fat. Now to show you the versatility of the Arbitrator as a class, I'm going to do what I did for the other 4 classes. I'm going to go over the big things in their talent tree. Their blitzes, which are basically throwables, their auras, which are passive buffs they apply to themselves and teammates that are nearby, their active abilities, that should be pretty self-explanatory, and finally their keystones, the ultimate nodes that you are building to. So let's get right into the first things you run into, the blitzes. The Arbitrator's first blitz is remote detonation, where you blow your dog up because you're bored. It's alright, he likes it. You get 3 charges of this blitz and you get a new one every minute, meaning you don't pick up grenades for it. This is probably the Arbitrator's strongest blitz. It does not take many damage boosting nodes to put this thing to the point where it can instantly kill hordes. And even if it doesn't insta-kill them, the electrocution is going to apply damage over time that'll probably kill them shortly after. And even if it doesn't kill, you still staggered every single enemy hit by it. The only real downside to this blitz is you can't tell your dog exactly where to go unless you're sending them after an enemy, so you're going to have to really pay attention to your dog's location to get value out of this blitz. Of course, on higher difficulties where there are hordes of special enemies, it's a lot easier to just send them into the middle of a special enemy horde and detonate them. It's really only tricky when you're trying to get basic enemies off you, because you'll use this trying to make space, but your dog was actually over there killing that guy, so you made space over there, but there's no space where you are. What are you doing in an area where there's no space? Are you stupid? Also, when all 4 Arbitrators stick their dogs onto a boss enemy and start activating this blitz, it just bullies the poor thing. The Arbitrator's second blitz, the Voltaic Shock Mine, is pretty cool and different from every other blitz in the game because, like the name would imply, it is a mine. The Arbitrator pulls it out and deploys it very slowly, but that's because it is meant to be set up beforehand. That doesn't mean you can't pull it out and throw it at your feet when you're about to be swarmed, it's just not designed to be used like that. When the Shock Mine actually activates, it behaves a bit like the Psyker's Lightning Blitz, where it shocks everything in a 5-meter radius for 15 whole seconds. It's actually really good. You can shut down an entire lane where enemies may be coming from and make them easy pickings for you and your team. I'd say this is my personal favorite of the Arbitrator's 3 blitzes, but that's because it works extremely well with something I'm going to talk about in a second. The Arbitrator's third and final blitz is the Arbites Grenade, and it's just as a grenade. It's an impact grenade. You know, if you hit an enemy with it head on, it instantly explodes. You get 4 of them, which is pretty cool. It's quite a lot of grenades compared to other blitzes in the game, but there's not too much to say about it. It's a grenade. This is my least used blitz for the Arbitrator. Moving away from blitzes and on to auras, I'd say the Arbitrator has 2 really good auras and then 1 that's just okay. The interesting thing about the Arbitrator's auras is that all 3 of them have a specific node that make the auras 3 times as strong. Like, all 3 of them combo exceptionally well with an earlier node in the talent tree, like their first aura, Part of the Squad. This aura gives your dog a coherency radius as if it was part of the team, and what that means is by just being near your dog, you regenerate toughness as if it was a team member. It also means if you are in coherency with another teammate, the toughness regeneration for both of you is going going to be stronger because there's another member in coherency. It's kind of like the Zealot's Loner aura, where you're always regenerating toughness even if you're by yourself, but part of the squad also gives you and your team 7.5% toughness damage reduction, which is nice. But this aura gets way stronger if you pair it with Man and Cyber Mastiff, which makes you replenish 5% toughness per second just for being near your dog. So by just having your dog with you, you're getting 5% of your toughness back per second, and you're getting the coherency toughness regen. The Arbitrator's second aura is Ruthless Efficiency, and it's the weakest of the bunch because all it does is add a 7.5% reload speed buff, which is not a big number. If this is your only buff to reload speed, you will barely notice it on most guns. But the Arbitrator has other nodes to buff their reload speed, and more importantly, one of the first nodes you can get gives you 15% range damage for 5 seconds after reloading. So even though the number on the aura isn't that impressive, it does contribute to a fairly strong Arbitrator ranged build. The third aura is called Breaking Descent, and it's the go-to for a melee Arbitrator build because it gives you and your allies 10% additional damage versus staggered enemies. Now, a majority of the Arbitrator's melee weapons have very high impact, which staggers enemies, but there's a node right before the auras that makes this aura free damage. Concussive makes it so that melee weak spot hits make the enemy count as staggered for 4 seconds even if you don't actually stagger them. So thanks to this node, when you hit an enemy in the head, even if you don't stagger them, you and your team are going to do 10% more damage to them because they count as staggered even though they're not. Honestly, Concussive may be the single strongest node in the entire game, not just the Arbitrator's talent tree, because the Arbitrator has so many nodes that buff them when they stagger an enemy. There are nodes to give you toughness back when you stagger an enemy. There are nodes that make enemies take more damage after you stagger them. There are nodes that increase your rending after you stagger an enemy. And thanks to Concussive, you don't actually have to meet the condition to get any of these benefits. As long as you aren't aiming at the enemy's feet, you're going to activate these on every single melee swing, which effectively means that Breaking Descent is a better version of the Veteran's Fire Team aura that gives your whole team 5% extra damage. Now, in an unprecedented turn of events, it turns out the Arbitrator actually has 2 sets of Keystones, so we're gonna move to the first set of Keystones that are all centered around the dog.
Just get out of here, you stupid, dumb animal!
2 of the 3 dog Keystones really aren't that interesting to talk about. Unleashed Brutality makes your dog do 25% more damage to special enemies and prioritize them over other targets. But Go Get 'em makes your dog prioritize ranged enemies and deal 50% more damage to them. You could argue Go Get 'em is the stronger of the 2 because ranged special enemies count as ranged enemies, but Unleashed Brutality affects everything, and it's not like ranged enemies are particularly beefy that you need a whole extra 25%. I'd say Unleashed Brutality is better if you're going to be actively telling the dog what to do and building around the dog, but Go Get 'em is better if you want to just have the dog play mostly passively. Regardless, the third dog Keystone is the most interesting because it gets rid of the dog. I've already explained that even if you don't put any points towards the dog, it's fairly strong by default, so you get a fair amount of compensation for giving it up. For leaving your dog in the car, you get 15% toughness damage reduction, 10% attack speed, 10% damage, 1 extra charge of your blitz, and you get a blitz charge back every 60 seconds. Now obviously the flat stat buffs are pretty impressive, but 1 extra charge of your blitz abilities and a free blitz charge every 60 seconds is absolutely nuts. Those are 2 entire nodes in the Veteran's talent tree. Giving up your dog means you can have 5 Arbites grenades or 3 shock mines. I primarily use this Keystone with the shock mines because they're very good and having more of them more often is insanely strong. But 5 whole Arbites grenades with more on the way would actually make that blitz pretty nuts too. But you know, if you don't want to put any points toward the dog or toward getting rid of the dog, all 3 of these dog Keystones are completely optional. You can go right to the abilities right after this, which is how I'm going to segue to talking about the abilities.
Do you have any 7s?
Castigator's Stance is probably the most versatile of the Arbitrator's 3 abilities. When I first heard the word stance, I was really worried this one was going to be a copy of the Veteran's Executioner Stance. But luckily, I was entirely wrong, could not be more off target with that one, because this ability kicks fucking ass. Castigator's Stance basically turns you into RoboCop or Terminator, but not Captain Kirk or Darth Vader. It lasts 10 seconds, and unlike Executioner Stance, there is no way to extend that, but honestly, it'd be absolutely busted if you could. In those 10 seconds, you get 80% damage reduction. So right off the bat, this ability is amazing for clutch plays where you finish objectives or get teammates up. But it's really the offensive capabilities that make it my favorite of the Arbitrator's 3 abilities. In addition to the damage reduction, Castigator's Stance also disables your ability to sprint but gives you 15% movement speed. The trade-off is that it also removes all movement speed penalties. So even though you can't sprint at an enemy, you can walk them down moving at max speed, charging up a heavy melee attack. Or you can do a drive-by on foot by aiming down sights while moving at max speed and absolutely blitzing a group of enemies. I really love using Castigator Stance with a Crusher, which is this big two-handed club, and this thing slows you down by a lot when you charge up a heavy attack. But you activate Castigator Stance, shrug off all damage, and walk down a heretic holding this thing over your head. It's absolutely addicting. The only real downside to Castigator Stance is that unlike Executioner Stance, it doesn't do anything about recoil, so guns that should be really fun with this ability, like the Braced Autogun or the Vigilant Autogun, just aren't that great. The modifiers on this ability are pretty cool. Writ of Execution gives you 5% damage for each special enemy you kill, and that lasts until the end of Castigator Stance. Blessed Armament isn't as cool as it should be because it makes your range kills during Castigator Stance refill 10% of your magazine's ammo, but it has a 1.5 second cooldown. So that means you're only going to get big value on the autoguns, and all the other guns you're maybe going to get 1 or 2 extra bullets before you still have to reload. And then Bloodlust just gives your dog 75% extra damage during Castigator Stance. I don't use this because I use Castigator Stance with the No Dog Keystone.
Up. Put them over your head. Let me see them. This is the police. Come out with your hands up. You have the right to remain silent.
The Arbitrator's second ability, the NunioAquila, is my least favorite of the 3. It's not bad by any means, I'd go as far to say it's a good ability, but I think the Arbitrator's other 2 abilities are near the top for most fun abilities in the game. But in comparison, the NunioAquila is very passive. You put out a speaker and then it buffs your team and nerfs enemies. It's a fair amount of buffs, 7.5% toughness per second, 30% extra suppression dealt, 30% impact, slowdown immune, suppression immune, minus 25% recoil, and immune to interruption while aiming down sights. Then with the modifier, they also get 30% toughness damage reduction, 30% revive speed, and 10% attack speed. Enemies in the radius take 15% more damage, and with the other modifier, the gap between their attacks is 50% longer, and their attacks deal 25% less damage. It lasts for 20 seconds, and by all metrics, an absolutely fantastic ability, but all you're really doing is putting a thing out and standing in a circle. It's got a 30-second cooldown and goes on cooldown the second you throw it out, so theoretically you'll only have 10-second gaps where you don't have this thing up, but again, it's just a Bluetooth speaker. I could be RPing as RoboCop or having a ton of fun with the Arbitrator's last ability, but instead all I'm really doing is pulling out the JBL and ruining the Lex Breaker's day at the beach.
Oh, it's NXT champion! Oh my!
The Arbitrator's last ability, Break the Line, is a dash, and before launch I was really worried it was going to be a copy of the Zealot's dash. But outside of getting buffed for a duration after the dash, you use Break the Line in an entirely different way than the Zealot's dash. The Zealot's dash is all about high single target damage, the Arbitrator's dash is all about multi-target staggering. Break the Line is a bit like Ogren Rock on enemies that are too big to instantly die to it, meaning that this ability knocks anything in the game on its ass. It's also got the shortest cooldown of any ability in the game, and that can be made even shorter with an ability modifier. It also gives you 25% damage and 50% impact for 6 seconds after you use it. Break the Line is absolutely amazing. Like I said, this and Castigator Stance are both near the top for me in terms of the game's most fun abilities. And I really don't gotta explain why. You can punk out any enemy in the game. Ragers, Maulers, Ogre enemies, mutants, even monstrosities. No matter how big and tough they are, you shoulder check them and send them stumbling trying to catch their balance. And the modifiers reward you for slamming into as many big and tough enemies as you can. Commendation from Condemnation will give you toughness and stamina back for every elite, specialist, or monstrosity you slam into. Targeted Brutality gives you half a second cooldown from every basic enemy hit and gives you a full second cooldown off of every special enemy or boss hit up to a maximum of 5 seconds for a 15-second cooldown. I use this ability with my full dog build because there's another modifier that gives your dog 50% extra damage for 12 seconds after you use this potentially 15-second cooldown ability. But that's all the Arbitrators' abilities. To cap off the video, we're going to their Keystones.
You just said each member of the team is chosen for their unique abilities. He does exactly what I do, but better.
Now, the Arbitrators' Keystones are pretty interesting because I'd say they only have one that's fully unique to them, and the other two are a little derivative of other classes' Keystones, but also arguably better versions of those other Keystones. Like, Execution Order is very similar to Psyker's Disrupt Destiny Keystone. Enemies are randomly marked for you and you get buffs for killing that enemy. The only difference between Execution Order and Disrupt Destiny is that Execution Order only marks special enemies. If you remember, one of the many effects of Disrupt Destiny is that killing a marked enemy gives you a 1% damage bonus that can stack up to 15 times, and each stack lasts 5 seconds. But you only need to kill one enemy marked by Execution Order to get a 15% damage boost for 8 seconds. Plus, you get 10% attack speed and buff your dog's damage by 150% for that 8 seconds. Disrupt Destiny also gets 2% extra crit damage and 2.5% weak spot damage for every stack, but there's a modifier for Execution Order that gives you 10% crit chance and 25% crit damage for that 8 seconds. You can also get 50% faster cooldown regeneration and 10% rending for that 8 seconds. Then you got another modifier where killing a marked enemy gives you 1% damage against and damage resistance from bosses, stacking up to 30 times, and it's permanent, lasting until the end of the mission. So with just one kill, the Arbitrator can get the default max damage boost of Disrupt Destiny, almost get the max crit damage boost of Disrupt Destiny, and by killing marked targets, he gets a permanent buff to boss damage. I guess the trade-off is meant to be the Psyker can get Disrupt Destiny stacks off of basic enemies, whereas the Arbitrator has to kill specials, but specials are basic enemies to the Arbitrator. You remember, the dog is one of the best special killers in the game. I'm not saying that Execution Order needs a nerf, I am saying that it's a little unfair to the Psyker that the Arbitrator can get what they have to work for with a fraction of the effort. But you know, even though the Arbitrator arguably has a better version of one of the Psyker's Keystones, the Psyker can still hold their heads high knowing that they're one of the best classes in the game. Ain't shit arguable about the Arbitrator's second Keystone, Terminus Warrant. It is straight up a better version of the Veteran's Weapon Specialist Keystone. Weapon Specialist is all about getting kills with your gun to buff your melee and getting kills with your melee to buff your gun. But the buff for your gun only lasts 5 seconds and the buff for your melee lasts 10. Not to mention that the buffs are just attack speed and crit chance for your gun and dodge distance for your melee. The modifiers for Weapon Specialist only give you stamina, reload speed, and one gives you toughness back. I'm just going to read the description of Terminus Warrant to you, and without even getting into the modifiers, you should already be able to tell that it's better. Ranged attacks grant stacks of melee justice for each enemy hit, max of 30. Melee hits remove 1 stack. While you have stacks of melee justice, gain 15% melee damage and 25% melee impact. Melee hits grant stacks of ranged justice, max of 30. Ranged attacks remove 1 stack for each enemy hit. While you have stacks of ranged justice, gain 15% ranged damage, 50% ranged cleave, and 50% suppression. So right off the bat, this keystone actually gives you a damage buff, which is pretty huge. And more important than that, you don't lose your stacks over time, you only lose them when you use them. Plus, it's not on kill, it's on hit, so it's just easier to get stacks of both. Just like Weapon Specialist, Terminus Warrant has a modifier that gives you 20% reload speed, but Weapon Specialist, you only get that reload speed for the 5 seconds range Specialist is active, but Terminus Warrant, you get that as long as you have stacks of range Justice. And then Terminus Warrant has 2 modifiers where if you switch to your other weapon while you have a certain number of stacks, you get buffs that last until you run out of stacks or switch your weapon back. One of those buffs being melee attack speed and fire rate, which is all Weapon Specialist has. You've been hearing a lot of psychers complain about the dog just being a better version of Brain Burst, but there's been surprisingly few veterans complaining about this bullshit. But to be fair, it's pretty hard to file a complaint while you're swinging from a ceiling fan. I'm not even saying nerf Terminus Warrant, I'm just saying give veterans something, man. Anyway, the Arbitrator's last keystone is the fully unique one, and it's called Forceful. You get a stack every time you stagger an enemy or block an attack. There's a max of 10 stacks lasting 5 seconds each, and each stack gives you 5% impact and 2.5% damage reduction. You also lose a stack when you take damage, which I like a lot more here than I do on Ogren's Feel No Pain keystone, because at least this one encourages you to be in the fight, whereas that one encourages you to just avoid damage altogether. Not too much to say about Forceful, it's the tank keystone. You can get passive toughness regen, you can get stun immunity, bonus cleave, and attack speed. You can sacrifice all your stacks on combat ability use to give yourself more damage. It's fine, it's totally fine and totally reasonable, it's just the other two are so offensive I can't muster up the energy to say much about Forceful. And that's the Arbitrator's talent tree. This class is a lot of fun and it's really strong, but I would advise against buying it until you put a significant amount of time into all the other classes first. There's a very strong case to be made that the Arbitrator is now the strongest class in the game, and personally I think you miss a lot of fundamentals by skipping straight to the strongest characters in any game. It's like if you bought a fighting game and the first thing you did was look up a tier list and pick an S tier character to main.
Alright, so in that situation, Brendan, I'm gonna kill you.
I hope you all enjoyed this video, even if it was just a glorified mic test. I know for a fact that the DOGtide video is not the video on my channel that people really wanted a sequel to. To all the people to this day still commenting, asking for a sequel to the creepypasta video, I got one thing to say to you.
Okay.